How's
Dude,
it going, dude?
holy shit.
Nice to formally meet you.
Yeah. Nice to fully meet you as well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm here in the cab over camper. I've been building this thing out for the
Oh,
last couple
rad.
weeks. Yeah,
Dude, that's
it's
sweet.
pretty sweet.
Can I get an exterior view at some point?
Y- Yeah, for sure.
I'm just so curious.
Yeah, I got it in Colorado after my bike tour. 1996 Sunlight camper. Um it's a slide in pop up, so it's nice and lightweight and works well with the truck, and it kind of gives me the best space to travel in and adventure in. So it's
Yeah,
kind of what I'm at right now.
that's sweet, dude. What truck do you have it on?
I've got a Ram 1500, so it's like a 2005 um, truck, and this is pretty much the heaviest camper I could put on here. It worked well. Um, Man, when I was on my bike tour, I had a lot of time to kind of scavenge Facebook Marketplace, and
Yeah.
this thing popped up in a 5,000-mile radius, and it was located right near Nick's old house in Steamboat. So it was kind of serendipitous and meant to be. So after my bike tour, I drove out and picked it up with my girlfriend and broke it in and went on an epic little climbing trip. So it's been with me for at least 5 or 6 months now.
That's amazing. Yeah, and what a cool thing to be building out yourself too and working on that. Oh, you broke up. Hello? You there? Do I have good Wi-Fi? I think I do.
Let's see, I think.
Oh, I hear you.
Hey, I'm gonna run inside to get some better service here.
Okay, that works. Really quick, can I see the outside of the van
Yeah, for sure.
or the truck? Oh,
Yeah,
dude, that thing's awesome. Nice sticker.
yeah.
Hell yeah, dude.
It's it's pretty sweet. One sec here.
No problem.
I work at a I work at a metal shop as like a aspiring blacksmith slash forger. So this is kind of the space I've been working in mostly. But I'm gonna go in here.
Following in Yvon Chouinard's footsteps.
Okay, sorry about that. This should be a
No,
lot
no,
better
you're
here.
good. Boom. Okay, there we
Sweet.
go. Sweet. But yeah, I was just saying, following in Yvon Chouinard's footsteps.
Kind of. It's kind of the dream.
Yeah.
He's a legend for sure.
Yeah, he is totally legend. I read his book last year, the Let My People Go Surfing, which is amazing.
How was that?
It's good. It's kind of a work life philosophy and how to balance the two and what good things are essentially and like what good work is and what good products are. Um and his whole take on that because he clearly has balanced it well considering his adventure to the fact that he built both essentially what is now Black Diamond and Patagonia. That's quite
Yeah.
the combination. So yeah, it's fantastic. But so what are you working on as a blacksmith? Or what are you learning about?
Yeah. So uh, here in Santa Barbara, I work for this family called the Pattersons. It's called this Santa Barbara Forge, and so I'm here learning the trade and making these cast iron pans. So I'm learning how to shape metal, cut metal, sand metal, drill metal, and forge metal, um, to make these kind of handmade custom pans.
That's awesome. I love cast
Yeah,
iron.
it's pretty
Cast
lucrative.
iron's the shit.
It's maybe the best gift you could ever give someone is a nice handmade pan. So I've
Yeah.
got way too many people on the list, and I've promised hundreds of pans. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Got a
So
lot to catch up on.
yeah, a lot of catching up to do for sure.
Yeah. Um, so how do you make a pan?
Yeah, well, it starts with carbon steel. That's the material we use. It's cut into three different sizes by a big CNC machine. And once you have the cut, you sand the edges and you use an air hammer to kind of texturize the rail of it, and then you put it into a big press, and it forms into the perfect symmetrical shape. And from there, you have the pan base. But the real magic is with the handles. We get these 3/4 inch kind of steel rods, and from there you put it in this real hot forge, and it comes out glowing, and you shape it. So I've been learning all the steps, and now I'm kind of running the show. It's pretty sweet. I could kind of do every step, and from there you're making the handle, and you're stretching the metal, and you're stamping it, and you're texturizing it, and you're hammer hitting, and yeah, it's a pretty sweet gig. It's nice that the owner's a climber, because he lets me go and explore and come back and work whenever I want. Kind of got access to clock in and out whenever I want. So there's always big
Special.
trips on the rise with working with him, with the Pattersons.
Yeah. So you're balancing
Yeah,
your life.
yeah.
Yeah, wait, actually
He's
definitely show me one.
So this is one
Whoa.
of our sizes. This is like a small, but it's got that Santa Barbara stamp, and that handle is made custom. So it's pretty sweet. Yeah, my camper's got a few of them.
And it's funny, there's I more recently I'm getting more interested in product and design and all that. And there's very few gifts and I guess just things that will outlive you. Like truly will. And
Yeah,
cast iron
good point.
skillet pan is definitely one of them. So you're right, that's a special gift. And honestly, like I have a Lodge cast iron and then I have a Staub one that I got for Christmas. Shout out to my mom. But yeah, those will probably both outlive me. And the Lodge ones were like 25 bucks. So
Wow.
it's pretty cool. But I'm also of the mindset, buy once, cry once. So I'm sure if the
I like
Santa
that.
Barbara, yeah, buy once, cry once, yeah. Uh, if the Santa Barbara, what's the company called? Santa Barbara Forge?
Yeah, Santa Barbara
Yeah.
Forge.
If they're more expensive, I mean, they're handmade and by people in the US in Santa Barbara like you. That's pretty rad and
Yeah,
has a story with it too,
it does. And
which is
I
important.
really like your reference to Yvon Chouinard and that Mountain of Storms. He's or in 180 South, sorry. He was working in Ventura, not far away from here, building in his at his property. So it's cool to think that you know, I get to share a little bit with Yvonne.
Yeah. You should hammer some pitons just for some
I've
beaks or
I've
something.
I've tried. I've for sure have tried.
Yeah, that's funny.
A little scared to test whip them though in the mountains for sure.
Yeah, that's next level. Oh,
Yeah.
that's funny. So you're building up your camper. What do you want to do with it?
Yeah, well dream is to customize it all the way in and out. Kind of as my first project. I've always been inspired by the friends here in Santa Barbara who build and create and enjoy that genuinely. So this is kind of a continuous project. There's no real final goal in terms of fabrication, but like realistically, I'm gonna live out of it in the summer. As I work for this hot shot crew this year in town. So hopefully living out of it during the fire season to save some rent and to kind of step away from town and be a little more present with the crew and with the season. So yeah, and also just to have epic trips, to go on big climbing trips and have that. Uh, Definitely tired of sneaking into my old little dingy Ford Ranger and having no space. So this is a big upgrade for trips too. So that's just as important.
Yeah. Does
Yeah.
do you think it'll feel more like a, I mean, I guess it's a tool and a home, which is interesting. I mean, I guess anyone's house is a tool, but definitely the van dirtbag slash like camper truck life, like that piece becomes so important because it's your gateway to a sustainable life, I guess, on the road as well. Because you could live out of the back of your truck or something like that for a little bit, but the more, in a way, comfortable you make it, the more realistic it is in the long term, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, definitely true. I agree. Uh, when I first bought the camper, it was a trip because I think I was in like LA visiting a cousin, and he was in this really nice neighborhood. And uh, the zone I was in was objectively really wealthy and expensive, and it looked nice. The architectural design was all there, and uh, it was just it was a fancy zone. And you get into the back of the camper, and it kind of um, eliminates all outside experience. So no matter where you're parked, you're still sharing that small space in the camper. It's pretty interesting. You can escape to this space that you have, no matter where you are, whether it's in LA or whether it's in the mountains or um, on an international trip. It's cool. It's a space that is kind of safe too.
Yeah. And yeah, that's super important to have that safe space for you when you're going on doing cool shit. So I guess I want to bring it back a little bit. And so are you from Santa Barbara?
No, grew up near San Francisco,
San
a little bit
Francisco?
south in San Mateo,
Okay.
specifically. But I went down to Santa Barbara to go to the community college, and then ended up transferring into UCSB. And I finished uh, a year and a half ago, um, studying communications as an undergrad. So
Sweet.
yeah, I'm fresh out of it.
So how old are you?
25.
You're 25. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay. I'm 23.
23. That's a good. You're young as hell still.
I'm
Young forever.
stoked. I'm stoked to freaking honestly, dude, like so this for some context, I have followed you and what you've done since the bike ride. And we'll get obviously into all that later. But since then, you've shown your fair share of adventures, and I that is super and in the short of it, that's very important to me, is doing similar stuff to you and living that type of life, a life that where you can look back and look at all the cool shit you did and not have any regrets about things you didn't do. So I think that's also why I've wanted to have you on and do a podcast, which I haven't done in a year or more. I've done a lot of these, and it's funny being back, but I just thought about talking to you on the phone, and I figured what I would learn from listening to how you've managed to do this, and also just the little tidbits and funny stories, uh, and also all the stuff for Nick, all of
Yeah.
that kind of culminated together. And I was like, damn, I should just make it legit and talk to you and record it so
Yeah,
people
man.
can
I'm
listen.
really stoked. I've never been on a podcast before, and I've listened to some of your other guests, and it's pretty cool to have a space to do this in. How long have you been doing podcasts for?
So I started in 2021. So a little context for me, I went to school at film school at Chapman University for documentary. And I've dabbled in YouTube, I've dabbled in podcasting. We're editing. I'm actually in my girlfriend's parents' house in her bedroom.
Nice.
And
Gorgeous.
in a way, we're doing the same thing. And I live kind of doing a bunch of, like, I just lived in Bozeman for a year and a half, and now I'm in my girlfriend's parents' house editing our movie. So we're saving money on rent and finishing our documentary, which is about my grandpa, and all of the 16 mm footage that he shot back in the 70s. And it's all of his adventures, hunting bears in the Kodiak, ski mountaineering, like crazy shit. Yeah. And he has it
Hunting,
all on 16. Yeah.
hunting birds.
Sheep in the Wrangles, kayaking, like first descents, just crazy stuff that had never been done before. And he has it all in footage. Uh, and started to make a film out of it in the 70s, and he never finished it. So it's
Whoa.
just sat on hard drive since then. And we went up in May of last year to finish the film with him. And our film is about helping him finish his film and show all that
Incredible.
footage with the world. So yeah, uh, I graduated college and did some odd jobs for Instagram Reels for different local businesses in Bozeman, Montana, which is where I lived last year. During the summer, I learned to trad climb and just
Sick.
like get outside. And I'm
Oh
so
yeah.
hyped on trad climbing.
Let's
It's the
go.
best. I just went and climbed to the gym here. So climbing and then ski mountaineering are kind of my two main adventure shenanigans. And I'm really trying to push my climbing. We're moving to New York City, which is going to be crazy. And I want to climb in the Gunks a lot,
Yeah.
which I've heard is super rad. And just kind of work my way up to doing stuff like you, where you've climbed in Patagonia, and maybe I might do a fall trip to Yosemite. And this podcast is about you, but I just figure I'd give you
Man, that's
some
epic. Well,
some context.
I mean, just to add on that story with the grandpa, I mean, the guy sounds like a legend. And
Yeah,
how personal, how much more personal can it be? I mean, to pick up what he's left off for you. I,
yeah.
I'll be stoked to see it if you want to show me one day, man. That'd be so sweet.
Heck yeah, of course. And I hopefully a lot of people will be able to see it. I think we'll go with film festivals to start, and then from there, who knows where it'll go. But right now we're editing a rough cut, and it's at the stage where honestly we've been really struggling with the story. We've got to a part where we're stoked on the first 20 minutes, and then this kind of next section has been a struggle, but that's part of making films. So,
Yeah.
um, just grateful to be in a place where we can fully put all of our time and effort into it and getting it done before we move to the city. So
So
yeah,
rad.
dude, it's rad. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so you grew up in San Mateo, and what were you like as a kid?
Mm, I was a big basketball player growing up. My dad
Okay.
was a really good player, and so I followed his steps through middle school and high school. And um, I had a rad middle brother, Evan, who was into the more artistic scene, played a lot of guitar and surfed and climbed. So he was kind of my crutch for getting into more um, outdoor sports. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't until my last year of high school where I moved out to Yosemite to work at uh, to work at the pizza deck in the park. So that was my first real kind of trip outside of home, and especially to be in those mountains was insane. So that was kind of the kickstart to a lot of my climbing, was that first summer in Aramark working in the park. Um, but if it wasn't for Evan, I don't know. It would have made it maybe taken me longer to find climbing and some of those other activities. But yeah,
Yeah. That's rad. So how old is your brother?
so he's 2 years older than me. He's 27.
Okay, cool. So he kind of dragged you along to these different places, and now you're living the life. So that's really
Yeah,
cool. Do you ever give him a pat on the back and say thanks very much? That's
I
rad.
would, but he's so off the grid. He's Mr. Misto. He's somewhere in Australia surfing and living a
Really?
good life. Yeah, I think he's in Byron Bay. So he's traveled all across the world and has really grown uh, both internally and externally. So yeah, I mean, I haven't seen him in a while, but he's definitely down there in Australia surfing and living a good life. So yeah, he knows. We've climbed a little bit together. So
That's sweet.
um, yeah, pretty lucky.
And you say you have just one brother or two?
Got two brothers. Yeah, one oldest brother, who I don't really stay in much contact with. Uh, Not too sure, but yeah.
Cool. Sweet. Well, well, yeah, that's super cool that you had your older brother to introduce you all that stuff. So what was that first summer in Yosemite like for you?
Man, it was a grind. Airmark puts you to work. You can't. It's hard to dirt bag. It's hard to play hooky. It's tough to get big days in, and I think they had like a 40-hour minimum work week. So I was there for 2 months. I think I was there for maybe a month, maybe 2 months. Um, and I was working, yeah, middle of the summer at the pizza deck, cooking pizzas, using pizza as good bargaining material back at camp, and but eventually I quit, and I ended up just full time climbing in the park as I kind of stood around and stayed at people's tents and got to dirt back a little bit. So yeah, worked for about 2 months and then stayed for a few more weeks and got a lot of climbing in that first season. It was a real good kickstart.
And was it a big commitment for you to move to Yosemite, or was it just like that's the place?
It was the place. I mean, you've got El Cap there, you got Half Dome, and I knew that as a aspiring trad climber, that was the zone to be in. And it wasn't too much of a risk because it was my first summer after graduating my senior year. So I was going to City College, you know, to begin that journey, and I had a little window. So an Airmark, I mean, they have a really high turnover rate, so it was pretty easy to get a job there. But yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember your first trad lead? Was it in Yosemite?
Oh man, my first trad lead. I want to say maybe in Joshua Tree.
Okay.
Super early on, but I can't recall. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. What about
Yeah.
you? Do you have a first trad pitch memory?
Yeah, mine was like less than a year ago.
Nice.
Which is crazy. I kind of went and I think I've learned since, but I did my first trad lead in April. I think it was April 26th of 2023, and it was a 5-6 just like blocky, and yeah, it was easy and great. But as soon as I did that, I just kind of got the bug. And last summer I just went super hard. And I would wake up at with my buddy who was getting his master's, and we'd go out early in the morning and go get a multi-pitch in before work.
Nice,
We did
dude.
that
The
all
dream.
summer. Yeah, it was sick. Bozeman, lucky enough, there's the Gallatin Canyon is pretty close by, like 20-minute drive from where I lived. So there was this route called the Tower, Gallatin Tower, and it's a 5/8 3-pitch, and I would just do that like 2 or 3 times a week and just
So
cruise
what?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, yeah.
And I learned a lot really quickly. I got really scared really quickly, which was
Mhm.
good. And then I went to the Winds in August.
How was that?
It was insane. There was it's a 5-6 on Pangora, which was insane. And thankfully, I mean, there's bolted rappel stations and it's pretty mellow, but still, I mean, I went from April trad lead to Winds alpine climbing within a couple months, which I don't know how smart that was. And it like looking back, and I'm curious, I want to ask you too about like your thoughts on risk management. And I don't know if you heard of the phrase turbo Gumby. And if you ever were a turbo Gumby, I definitely was a turbo Gumby. I probably still am. And maybe I just got away with things, but I don't know if you can relate to any of that as far as how you got into climbing and sort of your uh how you learned from there. But
Yeah, I've always wanted to get out to the winds. I've never made it, but it's definitely on the list. That
yeah,
approach
Circuit the
out there
Towers.
I mean, just the approach to get in there into that canyon is pretty long. I'm sure that was an experience in itself.
Yeah, I mean, it was my buddy and I. I've had two climbing partners last summer, and I went up with one of them, and we were there for 3 or 4 days, and we climbed. So we did the backpack up, which was 14 miles and like a couple 3,000 feet of vert, but then you're
Wow.
just carrying. I mean, you know how heavy all the rack is and
Food
all
and
that
water
stuff,
too.
food and water, and I ate a lot. So I brought I brought everything except a cast iron skillet actually. Um, but yeah, we got up there and it rained, snowed the first day. This was in early August. And then so we took that day to kind of go up and scout and the approach and figure out what we wanted to do. And then next day woke up super early and got her done, and we actually didn't top out. So we got 300 feet beneath the summit and it started snowing. And we were like, yeah, it's time to go. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, we bailed, but it didn't even really, it's funny. Like we didn't top out. Well, we topped out on the route. We didn't top out on Pangora. It was just like a easy fifth scramble to the top, but it didn't feel like we didn't finish it. It felt like, okay, we did the route. That's what we wanted to do. And then we went down. So it was
Yeah.
no biggie, but yeah, the winds are amazing. I mean, if you've climbed in Patagonia, you definitely have some alpine experience. So I'd say you could probably do there's the Cirque of the Towers Traverse, which
Mhm.
links all of the different peaks, and you can do that in like a day, and it's
Wow.
pretty unreal. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never been to any mountains like that in the US, or yeah, even in Canada, probably. It's yeah, pretty amazing. So
Damn.
yeah, go check it out. I mean, I'm sure you will. You're just getting set up for all that stuff. So
Yeah.
that's all coming for you.
Yeah, working as a wildland firefighter, it's tough in the summer because I'm booked all summer fighting. So I really have a just a window in the winter, uh, which which is incredible to begin with, and it makes it nice to go down to Patagonia, since our winter is their summer. So the winds is going to have to hold until I get a municipal gig or you know a
Yeah.
a position on the floor. So yeah, but always dreaming about climbing trips.
Heck yeah. Um, so yeah, tell me about well, I guess so you finished high school, started climbing Yosemite, and then from there did it just kind of escalate regarding climbing, and then also the decision to go to Santa Barbara, like why move there, I guess, in the first place.
Yeah, I think it was nice to get away from home. Um, After high school, I was ready to change it up, and just spending 1 year down there was I was really lucky. I heard about the school through my brother's friend and enrolled. And in high school, I struggled a lot with school, and I was always I don't know, maybe I was just too young, too not really I didn't really have a good idea of what I wanted. And a lot of my friends got into universities, and I thought it was kind of unfair how I didn't get accepted anywhere. And so City College was a fresh start. It was a retry, and I remember taking the bus every day to campus, and I just dreamed about going to UCSB, the top public school. And I put my head down and grinded for 3 years and got in. So Santa Barbara is always, I mean, just spending time down there, it's as beautiful as they say it is. Um, and so yeah, I've been down here since, and I plan on being down here for a while. It's nice. I've got a nice spot with a bunch of buddies from school.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Tell me more about being on the bus and what it meant to get into UCSB and what that kind of meant for you in your head.
It was a total confidence booster and a reminder that who you are in high school doesn't really justify who you are later in life. I viewed myself as a big jokester in high school, and I tried. I mean, I tried, I just didn't know how to work effectively. So City College provided a fresh start, like I said, and that bus ride was pretty cool to think about. I mean, um, I knew where I wanted to be, which was at UC, and you have 15 to 20 minutes every day riding to school and back, and I used a lot of that time just kind of uh, fantasizing over getting into a top school, and it was kind of wanted to prove to the friends in high school too that I was well aware and able to get into a top school. So I think it was a chance for me to redeem my schooling, my academia. Um, I try to be a student at heart. I try to, you know, I kind of miss going to school. Honestly, I graduated a couple years ago, and it's a big change in pace and routine, which is uh, stabilizing at its core. So I'm finding ways to kind of dive back into academia. So yeah.
Why do you think, I mean, it just sounds like, I mean, through all the adventures and all that other stuff that you kind of came back to wanting to go to UCSB and receive an education and learn. And I guess why was that so important to you?
Well, schooling has always been important. My dad and my grandparents have always pushed that on me, and um, schooling is more of a way to extend your intellect. I think beyond the grades and the midterms and the finals. For me, maturing into a young adult and kind of extending my learning was always super important. Not necessarily my major or what I finished in exactly, because my major in itself is pretty broad. Communications is a super broad study, and so I used it as a crutch to kind of take other elective classes and extend, what I know and what I like. I took a lot of creative writing classes. Um, I took a lot of reading, like English classes, and like I don't know, personalized classes, which was the biggest. It's so advantageous to take classes like that, and I was lucky because some majors are pretty strict with what you take and what you can take. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's rad. Something I noticed, I kind of did a deep dive on your Instagram just to prepare for this conversation. And how you caption your posts, it's not just like I'll do is like this I do this thing, I just do like a stupid witty comment just because I don't want to come up with like, okay, I don't want to sit here for half an hour thinking like, oh, how can I like encapsulate what I'm trying to post. I'm just like, I'm just gonna post it and be done with it and delete this thing again. But
Yeah.
you're very intentional about your storytelling, I think. And I've seen that you wrote a paper about like living life on in a vertical way, like life on the wall. And then also just yeah, how you caption your Instagram posts. And I guess just the way you tell stories is very intentional and it has a lot of emotion. And I'm curious where you got that from or where you learned that or how it's a part of who you are.
Yeah, writing is it's incredible to channel emotion and evoke feeling through writing. And with all the climbing I do and a lot of the travels, it wouldn't be doing myself right. And it's not necessarily to post on Instagram or anything like that, but it's to capture a story that uh, was meaningful to myself, or maybe could be meaningful to other people. 180 South I has been such a integral part of my Stoke, and Jeff Johnson, local here in Santa Barbara. I mean, I think that was a big Kickstarter into taking advantage of writing and finding space to create. Um, and I came up with this, I coined this term, the poet's dream. And the poet's dream for me is it's a space, it's a physical space that you can write in uh, undistracted and be totally present in that space. So, places like on El Cap or in Patagonia or on the bike tour, it's kind of, for me, it's the poet's dream. It's a space that's meant to be wrote in. And yeah, I think a lack of connection also helps with that. Not having that phone on your hip all the time is pretty important to the poet's dream. And yeah, so I think about that term, and I think about the places I visit and the places I climb in should be taken advantage of in the writing world. So I've been doing that a lot, and there's friends that have inspired me a ton. I've got a good buddy, Stevie Page, who is a bit older than me, and he's an inspiring dude and did a lot of adventures on a kayak, and is a good surfer and a diver, and just a watersman, and he's written a couple novels now. So I think that's just the coolest thing, is to write these stories and to share them with people like Stevie does.
Yeah. Do you so like for me, right, I guess I'd call myself a storyteller. I don't know if I've earned that term yet. Um, but I know one of the best ways to improve your storytelling is just to write a lot. And
Yeah.
I've had the intention in the past to maybe journal every day or do something like that, but to I guess maybe I just need the discipline to do that among the other things that I do. But I think finding a, like you said, the poet's dream and having a space, maybe it's a space in your day or a place you can sit down and do it. But I'm just curious what works for you and where you find the desire to write and how often you do it.
Yeah, I don't write much when I'm home based here in Santa Barbara, but I always bring a journal on trips. For my ride for Nick, I wrote every day, and I knew that was going to be important because it was a whole new routine for me, and it was important to think about each day instead of letting the days just pass over you. Steve once told me he advised me to write 15 minutes a day. 10 to 15 minutes a day is all you need, and just getting in that routine of doing that really helped with my storytelling, and just writing truthfully and being articulating well is what I try to do in my writings. Um, but a big key is not having a phone with you. I mean, I've struggled a lot with my phone and scrolling endlessly, and that's a huge inhibiting factor for my creative output. So I really try to leave the phone at home and try to find spaces that might not have service, to be honest. My grandma's got a sweet little cabin in Big Sur, and um, old 100-year-old redwood logged cabin, and I've been finding myself wanting to go back there as much as I can to just kind of dump and let things flow easily, because nowadays, I mean, where we are, it's so busy. There's so much busy noise, metaphorically and physically. So um, getting to these places is kind of a big thing for me, whatever the adventure is. Yeah. Do you feel the same about phones and being so connected to the news and notifications all the time? I mean, that's got to be a huge factor for you too, I bet, with this age that we're in.
Yeah, I think my biggest like I've in the past and still in the present, but I think I'm working through it more is I my biggest struggle with I hate the word content, so I'll use the word media, is the fact that a lot of the time I think people, when they contribute and post or do something, and I've been guilty of this too, is you don't no one considers the back end and who's actually looking at these, whatever you're putting on the internet. Not no one, but people think in terms of, okay, what's my audience, or what's my like target, blah blah blah, like what the demographic am I going for, like how am I selling this thing to these people. And maybe that's just because I've made my living since graduating college off of making videos for Instagram, which is great. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, a lot of it comes from a good place and both parties are happy. But I think my struggle, yeah, just comes from like in the future, making a living in film is thinking about what I'm making and how it's actually affecting people. And
Yeah.
if the time that, because a lot of the time, the time that you spend on social media is not worth the time that you're giving. I mean, if I took the time that I've spent scrolling on Instagram, I probably could have learned another language or um, done a whole lot of things. Uh, and then if you think about the time that you're going to waste in the future going towards that and what that could be spent, it's just better to think like, okay, well, what can I do now to set myself up to use that time instead for something else I care about? And to me, I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at one thing I do is normally I'll have my phone in black and white, and then I put my screen time right on the front of my phone. So I've been on my phone for an hour and 11 minutes today. And I think like, okay, well, what are the things that matter to me? Uh, and it's right now it's finishing this film, happy, healthy family relationships, friends, obviously all that, but then also climbing and skiing and doing those
Mhm.
fun things. And I'm like, well, how much, if I spend an hour a day climbing, how much better would I be in a year? And it's like, the results would be insane, or reading a book or writing, or my point is that my time could be spent doing something else,
Yeah.
more productive. So, but it's also a necessary part of this life. I mean, alas, I'm making a podcast right now. We're talking and it's going to go on the internet, and people are going to listen to it. So I think it's just being positive and positive in that way, and not negative. Sorry, you just kind of like, I think about that a lot, and
Yeah.
it was a great question because it's so prevalent to what I'm doing and all the different ways I'm doing it. So yeah, good
Yeah.
question.
Well said.
Yeah. Um, so tell me about being at UCSB, and then tell me about what was it? Yard House.
Yeah, UCSB was a trip. I got in and had 1 year before COVID hit. So it wasn't the full experience I was hoping to have, but I ended up unenrolling during COVID and I hit the road. I think I spent that whole season, a few seasons in Yosemite, kind of waiting for in-person classes to resume. So I was still getting after it, and it was nice. I think Yosemite was entirely closed, but I had access to like a employee pass that I got, and so I was one of the few people that was in the park for some of those weeks. Got to do a lot of climbing, so I made my time worth it. And I obviously finished after everyone had already graduated, which was a bit of a trip too, um, because yeah, there's this kind of internal internal battle of wanting to finish with the people I cared about, and wanting that absolute uh, academic experience. So there's a bit of a trade there. You know, I gave up the friends and the communal experience graduating with friends for the academia and like finishing in person and being present and, you know, being taught at the school, which was why you go. So yeah, and the whole time or that last year I was living at the Yard House, which is this rundown little 2-story house on the end of Isla Vista, which is the town or city adjacent to school, and that was the most memorable times ever. Everyone that lived there were good friends, surfers and musicians and climbers, and we lived close to the water and had a ton of, you know, parties at the house and jammed a bunch. And um, I think there's 8 people there. I think there's like a guy in the driveway, a few people in the garage, a couple people loitering around on the side streets, and so that was a bit pivotal too in terms of what I valued. I mean, going from San Mateo to the Yard House was pretty drastic, and I got a good sense of what was important, and that was good friends, good music, having a good time, um, and and yeah, those guys all kind of inspired me to be who I am today. All the Yard boys.
Yeah.
Um,
Did
yeah,
Nick live there?
no, Nick never lived there, but he did come by a few times. We had a big party where the California Honey Drops played. Someone knew someone from the band, and uh, yeah, they were down to play at our house after a sold out show in town, and they said they needed like 30 mics and 10 speakers and all these pedals and technical music gear, and we spent the whole 2 days firing up and borrowing all of these things and got the Honey Drops to play. And I do remember Nick was there. Yeah, he was there at that show, but I didn't know him that well at that time. He was our good buddy Matt White's friend who grew up with him in Steamboat. So knew of Nick, but it wasn't until he moved into my home in Santa Barbara as a fifth roommate where I really got to know him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I grew up in Steamboat and grew up with Nick, and then also Matt White. Uh, I don't know him as well as I knew Nick, but I knew that he was going to the community college, so that's probably where you met him, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
freshman roommates, Matty Groves.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
Oh, that's so
he was at
sweet.
the dorms with me.
Wow. Yeah,
He
that's
got
great.
me. He was the one that kind of got me into Yard House. There was someone left out of the house, and he convinced me to move in. So he was pretty important, and in my time at Yard for sure.
At Yard. I love
Yeah.
that. Um, so yeah, you lived in Santa Barbara, and then would you just kind of go up to the valley and back and forth going on climbing trips, or what was your relationship to climbing when you were at UCSB?
Yeah, I was training a lot at the gym downtown, so I was always kind of staying fit. And like I said, that first season in Yosemite for Airmark kickstarted a ton. And that first season, I ended up climbing Half Dome, and I think I tried to climb El Cap that year, didn't climb it successfully. Um, so that was always in the back of my mind was getting to Yosemite on the weekends, and sometimes during the week if I could play hooky if it worked out. And yeah, so in terms of climbing, I was always psyched. And there's not a lot of like big wall climbers in Santa Barbara specifically, so I was um, searching mountain project forums for partners, and that led to some really incredible experiences on El Cap is just through mountain project partners who have now become some of my best friends and some of my main guys. Um, so that's always been the back of my mind is climbing out there. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Um, so you actually have a post that I screenshotted the caption because I really liked the what you said. But you said this is in June 10th, 2017. You said, in the next couple of years, I promise I will be able to say that I've rock climbed the face of Half Dome. Some of you won't understand my motives, but this wall is extremely iconic and important to me to do. It represents a sense of freedom and escape, nothing I can explain over Instagram. Huh. This project inspires me to step outside of my comfort zone and reach towards my goals. I continuously think about the limited time I have as a human and try to always remember that doing what you love is the most important thing in life. Make sure you reach out to what you love because, again, you might as well make the most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty profound. When I read that, I was like, yeah, I definitely relate to that. So I'm curious what you were thinking when you wrote it, and I guess what it means to you now.
Man, great question. At that time in 2017, I was not a climber. I had been on a annual Yosemite trip with some old high school friends and never even brought a harness or a chalk bag to the park in those times. And I remember gazing up at Half Dome thinking, man, I mean, to be up there and to be climbing on that wall. I'd been seeing photos from, Royal Robbins and Yvonne back in the day, those old black and white photos. And so that always kind of crept in my mind. And that was got to be the most significant climb I've ever done in my life. Just in terms of, testing myself and being able to climb that thing a few years later. I think it was like a year after that, or maybe a year and a half after, fantasizing over Half Dome. Um, and it was a big epic. I mean, we summited, but we we had to we had to bivvy on the wall with no sleeping gear, and we ran out of food and water and slept on this real small bivvy called Big Sandy, which is maybe 1,800 feet from the ground. And I remember being up there, and I was like, no one in this whole world is gonna understand how incredible this is. No one at all, besides me and my partner. And my partner happened to be my roommate at Aramark at the Pizza Deck. So, um, yeah, I think I was 19 years old or maybe 20. And, um, yeah, I remember the next morning, we were so sore and so tired from the day prior. I remember leading the last pitch to the lip of Half Dome, and I looked up and left, and there was a horde of people lined up on the wall at the top who had hiked it, and people were like, cheering and offering me water and food, and I got up there, and um, it was just really surreal to have climbed such an iconic route that I'd been manifesting for so long, and kind of a reminder that you can really do anything if you put your mind to it. And so that caption really embodies where I was, I think, after I climbed it, feeling present and, living a good life, because life is pretty short. I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen. Think about Nick, it's so crazy, this world we live in. And so from that day after Half Dome, I, I think I turned into a full-time climber. Maybe not like physically, I'm definitely not a strong climber, but I tend to go for big experiences and big ethics, and that's what it's about. Because at the end of the day, I mean, that's the life you want to reflect on, is like a collection of memories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The word adventure is thrown around a lot, and I think unfortunately it's been kind of beaten to death. But
Yeah.
what does the word adventure mean to you?
Yvon Chouinard once said, adventure starts when your plan goes to shit.
I like that. Yeah.
So it's exactly that, you know, setting big goals and going for it, and making it work and adjusting and readjusting. And yeah.
I like how it's funny because that honestly, when I think of defining adventure, I go down my rabbit hole of I can just talk and talk and talk, or think and think and think. But I love how simply you define that, or Yvonne Chouinard
Yeah.
defined that, bringing it back to him. Once again, just a legend. But another line in specific that stuck out to me that I also relate to, is I consciously think about the limited time I have as a human. Uh, do you still think about that? I guess your mortality, and I guess what's your relationship with your mortality?
For sure. After Nick passed, it's a huge reminder that nothing is guaranteed at all. But I think I think before last winter, I was pretty naive and optimistic about big trips, but heading down south to Patagonia was a little bit of a reminder that um, life is really short, and you got to really be careful, and you got to know what you're doing before putting yourself in positions. Yosemite is, not to say it's not dangerous, but it's really accessible, and it's there's so much traffic on El Cap, for example, and Yosar has an incredible crew that goes up and helps people who are injured or are stuck. But it wasn't until Patagonia where I was like, man, this is a bit more intense than Yosemite, despite having climbed El Cap a bunch of times. It's a different game. So after last winter, I think I take that a little more sternly, like objective hazard is real down there. And it's a big risk when you go climbing Chaltan. So yeah, I think I was reminded last winter that you gotta be careful, and you gotta be present, but you also can't be too naive and too optimistic.
Yeah, it's a fine line. Can you tell me about, so you've climbed in Yosemite. I mean, I want to, at some point I want to talk about just like your progression, but I think we'll stay on this topic of kind of objective hazard and risk management. Um, so you'd climb it in Yosemite for a couple of years at this point, climbing El Cap. Uh,
Mhm.
and at what point, I mean, we all have in the back of our minds like going to Patagonia at some point. I mean, I do too. But what point did you feel ready?
That's a really tough question. I don't think you could really ever be ready for Patagonia. I mean, I think for me, I mean, you go on these international trips and you have objectives that you want to climb. Uh, Usually these stellar lines and these, you know, big, beautiful peaks. And so having tunnel vision for those routes is really dangerous sometimes. So I think realizing that, taking it slow and not necessarily having to summit is the most important thing. Someone told me once, climbing El Cap is like finishing high school, and climbing in Chaltan is finishing college, and climbing in Pakistan is finishing your PhD. So those are huge progressions between the three. And so, being truthful to what you can do and your limit climbing and your comfortableness is important to think about. But it's hard to say. It's so subjective. It's big down there. There's no access. It's an 8 to 10 hour hike to get back into the valley, and uh, most of the year it's heavy winds and unpredictable storms. So it's a different game. It's totally down there at the bottom of the world. So it's hard to say. I don't know. I couldn't tell you when a person's ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but you committed and you went for it. So can
Yeah.
you talk about arriving in Chalten and what your objectives were and what you were thinking at that point?
Oh man. Well, I had watched Mountain of Storms a few times before buying my plane ticket. I was working in South Lake Tahoe as a wildland firefighter, and knew I was going to have the winter off, and I bought my ticket. And I definitely did not go solo. I had met a few Chileans in Yosemite years ago when I first started working there. And those guys, they live down there in Santiago, and they do trips down to Torres del Paine and Chaltan all the time. And so I got an invite from them to join them on this epic journey, driving from Santiago to the bottom of Chile. Um, so yeah, I bought my ticket, had 90 days in South America, and man, it was incredible. We drove all the way from Santiago to Chalten, took it took us a month to drive, stopping and climbing along the way, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, and dirt bagging as much as we can, obviously. Um, but after a month of driving and climbing, we got to Chaltan, and I spent 60 days there climbing, and we had 2 windows to climb, and 2 windows out of 60 days. So a few days per window for 60 whole days. And it was definitely kind of up to my partners what they wanted to do. I didn't know the area, and I didn't really know the approach, and I didn't know anything going into it really. I mean, I knew where we were going, and I knew the zone, but in terms of, approach beta and like what to really what to really expect was out of my range. So when I was there, I had 2 friends, Pato and Hernan, who man, they taught me a lot. But we wanted to climb Fitzroy, but ended up climbing a different peak nearby to yeah, and we had a little window to climb that. That's a whole nother story, but yeah. And then yeah, we climbed a Guia Rafael Juarez, which was like a 10 pitch climb on one of the towers next to the Fitz. So got a summit up there and had my helmet on with my Nick Wood sticker, and was so psyched. That was a few months after he passed.
Yeah. So that was 2022, 2020. Yeah. I guess it
Yeah.
would have been. Okay. So then it's been over a year since you've been to Patagonia, right?
Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
over a year.
just a bit over a year. And are you trying to get back down there soon?
Yeah. Yeah. Next
Cool.
next winter I'm for sure going.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I met
That's
some
rad.
really incredible people down there. So got a few partners lined up.
Heck yeah. Um, and I guess so I want to get into the firefighting stuff just because that seems pretty important as far as like the in between all the climbing and shenanigans, and then uh the Nick Wood and just Nick in general. But first, I guess, how much time do you have? Just because I don't want to take up too much
I
of your
got
time.
as much time as you need.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm
Sweet.
just at the top. I think everyone left. So
Okay, good to know.
yeah.
So yeah, I guess for someone like me, you're 25, so you're 2 years older than me. But you started your climbing journey 5 years ago or so.
Yeah, give or take
And
maybe 6.
yeah, and I started mine less than a year ago. I mean, I've been climbing in gyms and sport climbing, but regarding adventure climbing, it's been like a year. Not even, but so I guess what would you recommend to someone like me regarding like getting stronger and getting into big wall and those types of adventures and training for that and shenanigans, or how much that even matters versus just like showing up?
Yeah. There's a big stereotype with outdoor climbing and indoor climbing. For me, I think I would, if I had to give you advice, I'd say try to climb in every style. Whether it's at the gym to get stronger, or whether it's at your local crag, or whether it's a multi-pitch or a small big wall. I think all styles are going to be pretty important down the line. Um, but the big inhibitor is like, a work obligation.
Yeah.
So for me, I knew that I wanted to be a full climber, and I knew I needed months to do it. And so I found a job that allows me to do that. Whether that's fishing in Kodiak, Alaska this summer, or going to work Wildland Fire. I knew I'd have winters off, and I knew that would be my opportunity to climb full time. So I think climbing all styles and um finding those times to climb in is pretty key. I think a lot of people get held up with their jobs and, relationships and family obligations. I mean, don't get me wrong, that stuff is all important. And it's sometimes really hard to navigate around that. But um, yeah, I'd say look on Mountain Project forum page for partners, and you know, get stoked and share the stoke with people through the forums and do that. That's a
Cool.
huge one too.
Yeah, I think even getting to the wall a lot of the time is the biggest inhibitor.
For
Um,
sure.
for sure, with like the work, and thankfully, I mean, I'm in a job. I mean, my job is changing all the time, but where it looks like I'd be filming a film, editing a film, filming a film, editing a film. So I'm on set somewhere, and then I kind of, when I'm editing, we live a more 9 to 5-ish or more. I wouldn't say it's 9 to 5, but a more stable lifestyle. So and it allows the freelance and all that stuff allows for time to go and follow your
Yeah.
passions. So I'm lucky regarding that. But okay, well that's good to know. Yeah, I've just been trying to do sport and bouldering a lot more just to get kind of my strength up.
Yeah.
Um,
And as long as
it's
you're
been good.
stoked, that's the most you could do, you know?
Yeah, I'm definitely stoked. So
Hell yeah.
then how did you find or how do you find yourself getting into the whole firefighting scene?
I took an EMT class at SBCC when I was maybe a sophomore and a junior, and so I saw the medical side of being a wildland or being a firefighter in general. And I thought, man, what an incredible gig! You get to help people. You get to help people at their worst times, and you have a crew of guys that you work with, and it's a liberating job, and it's empowering, and it's inspiring, and it's a servant job, is what it is at its core. Um, and so there's two ways to go about that. You can go through the medical side and do ambulance work, or and paramedic work, or you can do, wildland firefighting, which is kind of this alternate route that people take. And um, I kind of learned about that through a buddy and this and that. And I knew that was going to be a 6 month commitment through the summer fighting wildfire, and then boom, you have the winters off, and it's really advantageous for me to do wildland, and then come back and do some medic work and hopefully get a job. So I kind of knew when I was a freshman or sophomore at SBCC. But man, that gig in Tahoe was really tough. But the camaraderie was so strong, and uh, you're with a crew, you're with your brothers, and you're fighting, and you're fighting fire, and you're working as a team. So that's kind of that's been a huge part of it. And an inspiring part, and a part that I'm stoked to go back to is working in a crew dynamic and putting the boots on the ground and putting hard work in, and um, being gifted this off season. So it's sweet. But last summer was a little different. After Nick passed, I chose to do that bike tour, which I'd love to talk about, and then I ended up flying out to Alaska to commercial fish for salmon, because I couldn't commit to a full fire season. So I'm always finding ways to work seasonally, and I'm always finding ways to put put the grind in, and have a little bit of time to relax. It helps with a lot of big climbing trips too, as you can imagine,
Yeah,
and bike
having
tours.
those in between times. Yeah, there's this
Yeah.
video that I saw of I think it was your buddy, you were hyping him up, and there was this beehive that he had to put it back over.
Yeah.
That looks like I mean, you just talked about the camaraderie that you had with the guys you were with fighting fires all over. I think you were in Idaho and in
Mhm.
different spots. But I guess just I'm curious to hear what's that like. Are you just camping and going to different fires and cutting brush and trying to manage it, or kind of what are your day-to-day roles with that?
Yeah. So we're stationed in South Lake Tahoe, and then uh, when we go nationally available in the early parts of the summer, we'll get an offer, and our essentially we'll get sent out to a big fire. And um, yeah, you work 14 days in a row, and then you get a few days off. So it's like 14 on, 2 off is what you're legally allowed off. And those 14 days are tough. I mean, sometimes you're working in the desert where it's over 100 degrees every day, and sometimes you're working in super steep terrain, and essentially you're trying to create a break between the fire and the unburned fuel. So you have 20 guys on a crew, and a handful of them are running saws, and a handful of them are running with hand tools. So for all day, for most of the day, I mean, whatever our squatties tell us, you're basically digging and you're creating a break between, yeah, the fire and the unburned fuel. So the work is really laborious, and it's almost military, paramilitary. Um, and yeah, the hours are long, and you're working all day, and you've got your guys with you, and um yeah, sometimes you're fighting thick vegetation, like thick brush fire, where big trees are falling and you're having to buck trees on fire and having to create that break despite anything. And then sometimes you're out in a random state monitoring fire. So it kind of depends on the workload. Um, but yeah, it's real hard work. I mean, I was definitely the hardest job I've ever worked in my life, and you grow a lot from that too. You kind of realize how capable the human body is too. You know, it's kind of like climbing a big wall. You kind of just have to suffer through it, and you kind of just have to push through it. And you've
Yeah.
got your guys with you to kind of keep you up, but it's addicting to go back. I mean, um, again, the camaraderie is so strong despite the super tough work and long days. Um, yeah,
Yeah. That's special. What are you thinking about during your long days and you're on the saw or you're lifting trees and stuff? What's in your head?
man, you're just thinking about resting your head and eating a warm meal and waiting to go home.
Yeah, it's addicting. That's funny. Funny
Yeah,
how similar that is
it's
to
funny how
climbing.
that works.
Yeah. Um, and then how about the camaraderie with the guys? I mean, you're just with them 24/7, moving
Yeah, you're
around.
with them for the whole summer. Eating with them, sleeping, shitting together, working through the night together, and yeah, those are some of the closest friendships you'll ever have, more so than anyone in the normal world, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so you did that 2 summers ago, but then last summer you said you took the summer off to do the bike ride for Nick.
Yeah, for
Um,
Nick.
and I think that yeah, this is a good place is to kind of talk about how you met Nick, how you knew Nick, and your guys' friendship.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to meet Nick again through Matt White, and he was finishing at San Luis Obispo, his undergrad, and he had been visiting Santa Barbara. I kind of knew of him. He was always stoked. He was always fired up, no matter what he said or what you said. He's always had a big smile. And um, he ended up looking for a place to live in Santa Barbara, and Matt moved him in, or I guess us three moved into our home that I live in now. Um, and it was really special. I mean, that guy did the first huge bike tour that I ever knew of. He rode the Colorado Divide, 40-day solo bike tour from Durango to Steamboat. And man, it took a lot of nights drinking beer to hear that story. I mean, like, the guy was so humble about it. And I remember he'd come in, and I had actually done a bike tour before I met him, from Eugene, Oregon to Santa Barbara, just as like a little test ride. And he was helping me with my bike setup. And I remember one time I was in the garage, I was getting all frustrated because I couldn't figure out how to fix something, and it was late, and I think Nick came down, and he was wearing his pajamas and I think he was shirtless, and he just volunteered to help, and he walked out of it and his hands were covered in grease, and I was like, man, this guy, see, this is a nice guy. You ask someone in the middle of the night to help you out with something dirty and problem that, like, tough to fix. Um, and that was him. That was who Nick was. And so we spent a lot of time hanging out, and we talked about bike touring together. We talked about riding the Pacific Coast Highway together. And so yeah, when he passed in New Zealand, um, I kind of knew I had to do that for him and had to do that for his nonprofit. And so it was a trip. Um, yeah. I mean, he kind of lived the best life out of all of us. He was known for that. I mean, a lot of people say he was an old soul, and it makes a lot of sense. He lived such a good life, such an adventurous life, and that was just who he was. He was never for anyone but himself. And I always thought that was inspiring. And you know, yeah, when he passed, it was I kind of knew I had to take the summer off to do that for him. And I'd gone out to Yosemite a few weeks before, or after he. I mean, it was crazy. After when he was in New Zealand, I was climbing El Cap, and I actually got the news when I just pulled over the summit of El Cap. I'd gotten a phone call, and I had gotten a phone call that he had passed, and it was super heavy. And but thinking about it now, it was kind of the best place to hear that. Uh, Maybe because I was already super delusional and dehydrated and starving and tired and this and that. I was susceptible, and I just felt him all the way through. And I knew that he was up there so stoked on that El Cap summit. And so from there I just knew that I had to do something, not necessarily for the fund and not necessarily for anyone, but just to kind of regress feel feel that out, you know. I think I've written about this before, but when something that traumatic or that traumatizing happens, like a friend passing, you know, with time and with the people you love around you, things do get better. And I was like, screw this. Like, I don't want to feel better. I kind of want to like dive into this and feel it out. And so I was dreaming about it. I had these really vivid, lucid dreams of seeing Nick, and I was like, man, this is so powerful. I need to like feel this out more. And so I had been brainstorming that bike tour with Nick, and had since he had passed, I knew that it was time to do that. So yeah, I mean, I was with my girlfriend in the park, and she was really helpful and supportive, and she she was like, you should do this. And I kind of just committed to it for that summer. So I had bought my ticket to Vancouver, Canada, and I started on my 50-day bike tour. Um, and yeah, um, it was pretty incredible, man. I've got a lot of stories, and um, but at its whole, I think just to just to feel him out both spiritually and physically was kind of the main motive for it. Um, Instead of, you know, bantering about the the GoFundMe updates and this and that. I mean, that was really sweet that people followed, but it was also incredible to kind of do it by myself. You know, I don't think anyone wanted to join me anyways, but I threw the offer out there. No one was down, but I was down. So I spent the summer doing that. Yeah.
And day to day, you're riding the bike. Are there What are the thoughts, I guess, just going through your head? I mean, you're probably thinking about Nick, but you're also probably listening to Jimi Hendrix and cruising around,
Yeah.
and and meeting people along the way too, that
Yeah.
you
Meeting
probably
people.
never expected to meet. So I guess just tell me a little bit more about what you thought about and what you learned and the people you met.
Yeah, man. Well, the first story that comes to my mind is the story of meeting this guy, Fred and Tug. Um, and this happened pretty early into my bike tour. And just some context here, I was borrowing my good buddy Dom's bike, his old 1990s Bianchi Volpe, an old steel frame bike. So I was loaded up with 80 pounds of gear and 4 bags on each tire, and or 2 bags on each tire. And so I was heading down the coast, right, from Canada, just along the highway. And 1 week in, I'm getting a good feel for the bike and what works and what doesn't work, when there's friction, when there's not friction. And all of a sudden my front rack breaks in half, and I'm sitting there on the side of the highway. And I'm like, holy shit, like Yvonne said, I've got to figure something out. I can't put all the bags on the back wheel. It's gonna blow out the other rack. I've got to figure something out. So I hitch a ride, and this guy Tug picks me up, old veteran guy, real sweet guy, and he drops me off at this bike shop, 10 miles away. I probably wouldn't have made it, and I'd called in before to the shop, and this guy Fred answers, and he says, "Yeah, we might have a bike rack for you. Let me check." And it was my only option, so I was hitching a ride regardless. And this will all make sense, um, because it all kind of ties into Kerouac, which is like a really interesting part of the story, because Nick was a big fan of Jack Kerouac and On the Road, and his beatnik lifestyle. So I get to this shop, and I'm walking across the street, and there's a big glass window, and I peek through it, and I see this old black and white photo of this like fighter jet pilot, with his jet. And I realized that the owner was this like ex-vet, and his name is Fred, and he's standing there 30 feet away from the door, and he's wearing these like blue sweat shorts with these high knee socks, and he's got this gross shirt on, it's covered in grease, and he's got this gap in his tooth, and he's got a big smile, and he's got these glasses on, and the whole shop smells, and there's bikes everywhere, and the countertop is every countertop is filled with bolts and nuts and screws, and it was a scene from Hoarders. And I'm like, holy shit, this guy is like a legend. And I go on, and I ended up talking to him. And Tug, by the way, is right next to me. That's my boy. Tug is next to me. He's an older guy. He's into the storytelling. And Fred goes on to tell me about his time before the war. And he goes, I was a beatnik. I was traveling from West Coast to East Coast. I was hitching rides, and I'm like, man, Nick brought me here, like to hear this story and to be present with this guy who's lived this life. And then he goes on to tell me that he was one of the characters in Kerouac's On the Road,
Wow.
which is so crazy. And he was Red. He was his character from he knew Jack. And I'm like, holy smokes. And I started like chiming questions in about that, and he's telling me about him and Jack would go to Sunlight Cafe, in San Francisco, and they would get into it, and Jack would dive into these topics and challenge, and it also was just like a beatnik dirtbag, and I thought it was so cool. And one day, Fred is with Jack, and Jack hitches a ride back. He never sees Jack Kerouac again. And Fred sees a copy of On the Road at the local library, and he flips through the pages, and yeah, he finds himself. And I remember thinking about that story, and I was like, holy fuck, this is an indirect friend of Jack Kerouac. And I was like, what advice would you give to a 25-year-old on the road? What would what advice would Jack give, knowing that you knew him? And he was like, well, son, like, and life is all about adventure. It's about the portfolio of experiences that you have. That's what Jack would say. And I left that shop with a brand new front rack, back on the road, 2,000 miles to go, and a good story with Jack Kerouac, and for a Jack Kerouac mutual friend, you could say.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
that's
brilliant.
what. Yeah, And that's not where the Kerouac story ends. I was descending further down the coast, and I was getting close to Astoria, or I was getting close to Arcata. I was about 30 days into my bike tour, and I hadn't been on a couch since. I was sleeping under bridges. I was sleeping in porta potties. I was just kind of making my way down, not knowing anyone from Canada, all the way to Arcata. And my brother Evan sends me a message. He says, "Hey, I have a friend. I have this friend who lives there. She might be able to host you." And fast forward, I'm knocking on her door, begging for a shower and a warm meal, and I see all these Kerouac books on the windowsill, and I was like, "Man, I just met this guy that was friends with Jack. What's the coincidence here?" And turns out this girl, um, her grandfather was a really famous poet, Lawrence Fergaletti, who owned the Sunlight Cafe, I think is what it was called, where Jack and Fred would hang out.
Wow.
And so this third guy comes into play, and Lawrence knew Jack and they were friends. And Lawrence was a publisher, and he was publishing Allen Ginsberg at the time, and it was controversial and this and that. And he'd often escape down to Big Sur, where Jack would also hitch rides to, which is where Jack Kerouac wrote his Big Sur novel, which was at Lawrence Fergaletti's house. And I was staying with the granddaughter of Lawrence. And I'm like, this is made up, dude. Like Nick is up there making this is crazy. Um, so I had a lot of time to think about those stories and to think about Kerouac and what he meant to myself. And I mean, I know he affected Nick. You know, Kerouac was a big dirtbag at heart and lived a good life, and you know, embodied that beatnik lifestyle. So it was cool. I mean, that was just like a little touch story of what I got to experience. But yeah, Kerouac. Who would have known?
Yeah, that's rad. I my uncle and my aunt gave me that book years ago, and I have yet to read it on the road. So
Yeah.
it's a sign. Gotta pick it up again.
Yeah, rereading, find Fred.
Fine, Fred. Um, but yeah, so you kind of headed down the coast and it took 50 days, you said. Um, was there any other stories or moments you
Man.
had that reminded you of Nick or yeah, I guess just anything profound that you want to share?
Yeah, well, I came up with 3 rules. And now these rules, I would say they're laws. And firsthand, you know, over 2,300 miles, these laws, I lived by them. One of them was never celebrate a hill climb because there's always one behind it. There's always one behind it. That was rule number 1. Rule number 2, when semi trucks pass, hold on for dear life. And number 3, no judgment ever for camping on under bridges or in the bathrooms or on beaches. So I was I mean yeah, like I I had a lot of time to think, and I had a lot of time to write, and I had a lot of time to bike. I tried to bike 50 miles a day. Um and I think it was like 37 days of biking total, and the 50 days from end to end. But those included like a week and a half rest in Santa Barbara, where the friends threw a big party. But yeah, man, it was incredible. From from the Rottweiler run-ins to sneaking over the Big Sur closure at night to um, convincing the final lady at Chula Vista to sell me a tall boy of Modelo, despite having my wallet stolen. And she rejected me. Um, yeah, there's a lot of fun stories. But it was an incredible tour. I felt like I can go on forever. If I had enough time and enough money, I would have gone all the way to the bottom of the world. And I think I could have, because you get into such a routine, biking every day, and and when you're biking with people, it's a different game too. You know, it's hard to escape people on the bike. You know, everyone rides at a similar pace, but it's also incredible to ride with people who you want to ride with. So, you know, I met a few friends from France that were biking from, Canada to Patagonia that were on the tour for a year and a half. I met this guy Doty who is this guy from Mexico who had started in Alaska biking to Patagonia. And I spent a lot of time with Doty. He was maybe 45, maybe 60, maybe 70. Spoke no English, had no saddlebags, somehow got by with a frame bag and a freaking saddlebag from
Wow.
Alaska, fighting off bears solo. And those are the experiences you cannot pay for, and those are the experiences you go for. It's the random people you meet, and I think those shared experiences are always going to be more powerful than being solo. But shout out Doty, man. He thought, man, we had a fire one night on the coast on the beach, and like Doty spoke a little English and I spoke a little Spanish. And I remember I was like, Doty, like how old do you think I look? Because I hadn't really talked to him. And it's never gonna leave me, dude. Doty thought I was 40 years old. He thought I was 40 years old, Doty. And so that was a big hit to the ego. I had to I had to I had to settle down after that and think about my life. But you know, met a lot of people. It was incredible, man, for Nick. I mean, I had a lot of his music too. Before it got onto Spotify, really, really lucky to have friends share some of his music. And so I was listening to a lot of it and also playing a lot of guitar. I traveled a little guitar with me on the back of my bike. So I was playing a lot and singing a lot and, um, learning his songs and having that. That was really important for my tour.
Yeah, what do those mean to you? I think to me, I they've probably come out almost a year ago. And funny enough, the I've only listened to I think five of them at this point. And I listen to a new one when I feel like I'm in a place that is significant to me, whether that's a
Whoa.
physical place or just a mental place. And
Why do
it's
you
and
do
it's a
that? I mean, I
um
understand why, but that's pretty that's pretty special. I feel like a lot of people would just, you know, listen to every song immediately, but you're holding off for those moments.
yeah, I don't know. It just kind of felt like a yeah, I mean it's the same. I don't know. So these I'm wearing this Nick Wood t-shirt,
Yeah,
the
I
Red
saw
for
that.
Nick shirt. And I my family got all of us them for Christmas. And in the
Cool.
letter, I think you wrote a letter or like typed out something. It came with the shirts. And it talked about wearing the shirt when you go and do something that's special. And when you go and do something that is an adventure or it's important to you. And to me, that the music is, I mean, like I try to live my life like Nick would. And when the stars align and I'm lucky enough to get out and go and make memories that are important to me, and listening to that music combined with those experiences is super profound. And
Yeah.
and it's fun because I mean I don't know how many songs are there. It's a lot. And I've
Mhm.
only listened to a handful of them, and I'll listen to the ones that I've listened to over and over again. But so over the next years or decade or however long it'll take to listen to all of them,
Yeah, that's
it, it
special.
it it feels special to be able to have things, those songs to look forward to listening to. So I still look forward to listening to a couple. I think I got to El Cap, which I was like, oh, I wonder what El Cap sounds like.
Yeah, that's a good
Uh,
one.
yeah, it's a really good one. I'm looking it up right now because I know there's a handful that are yeah, Park View. I love Park View.
Mhm.
Clay Pigeons. That
So
song to
good.
me. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my story with
He
uh,
was a wizard on the guitar. I mean, I had seen him play at the house here and there and at open jams, but he sang about important things.
yeah. You mentioned earlier his humility and how humble he was. And I think that his catalog and library of music, just how much he made at the quality he
Yeah.
made it. And no one, I mean, I think his closest family members and closest friends knew. But I mean, I'm
Yeah.
looking on this, there's 34 songs. Um,
Wow.
and all of that quality with the originality and his storytelling and his writing all coming together. And he didn't even, I mean, I look at like what I do and everything cool I do, I put it on the internet for people to see, but he just shared it
Yeah.
with his
He's
friends at a campfire
a
or
quiet
in
soul.
the backyard sharing some beers um after
Yeah.
a surf with some buddies. And there's just something so special about that. But now for it all to be on so we can
Yeah.
all listen to it, I feel like I just want to savor every last bit of it, just because I feel like that's what, when I think about him, that's what I feel. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a strong word to savor it, you know. It's once you listen to it, you can't unhear it, you know. So it's there's a novelty in hearing it for the first time.
Yeah, there is. So yeah, what did listening to those songs mean to you?
Man, I think I grew sick of them after a week. I listened to them hundreds and thousands of times.
Yeah.
No, I never get sick of it, but it just kind of reassured why I was doing the whole bike tour in the beginning. You know, he has this really, really classic line in Farewell where he says, "Don't live a life of stagnation. That's where the weary go to die. You got to keep moving if you want to see clearly." And holy smokes, like this guy is writing about that, you know, before anyone's really thinking about it. And to answer your question, I was doing that bike ride to see more clearly. Like I had said before, I was doing it to feel him out spiritually and physically, and that's why I was doing it. So the music was a reminder and it was a channel back into this mind and this headspace that I was aiming for. And yeah, I think again, like I said, that ride was to regress and feel it out, instead of letting time and 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 routine kind of skew those emotions. So the music was a kind of a catalyst for feeling those feels. But I definitely like abused the songs, and I definitely had to chill between days of listening to music and not listening to music because you know you can only hear so much.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Tell me about finishing, what that felt like.
Man, I thought there was gonna be a I thought there was gonna be a crowd of 100 people holding up roses and taking photos and throwing beers towards me and cheering me on, and it was everything but that. It was solo, and that's how I intended it to be. I didn't expect there to be anyone, um, because it was so far down there, but yeah, I finished the last stretch through Chula Vista. I don't know if you've ever been down Chula Vista, but it's pretty bare and, it's pretty residential and kinda, I don't know, kinda dirty down there. Just, like, a lot of trash and a lot of gray sky, and so I was pushing my last day. It took me 5 days from Santa Barbara, and my last day, I was biking through Chula Vista, and, yeah, I got to that border and I saw it, and I was like, "Holy smokes." I just finished this tour and, um, you know, there was this border patrol guy that was kind of parked in the area and he was like looking at me weird and he was kind of like getting ready he's I felt like he was gonna get ready to like stop me and question me and this and that and I was like, wow, this I think this was how it was supposed to end, you know, finishing solo, finishing um by myself because that's what the whole tour was based on, was being solo. But it was pretty incredible, man. I did have one buddy, this really good friend of mine, Tyler, who was there to pick me up, and he ended up driving me to the train station, which would have been 50 more miles north, a
Wow.
whole day to get there. But he saved my ass, and I think I bought him dinner or something to pay him back. But um, yeah, a lot of feelings of empathy. That was kind of a huge takeaway from the tour. Um, because I had really seen a lot. I had seen the poverty-stricken families in Oregon and really those nasty neighborhoods, the kind of drug-induced neighborhoods where you just don't feel that safe, to million-dollar mansions in Malibu. So on the bike, you're forced to ride through them, right? You could take a bus through it, but I never took a bus. I never cheated. I rode through it all, and so um, getting to see those drastic uh, socioeconomic kind of differences was a huge eye opener for me in my tour. Um, was just realizing that some people have it really good in life, and some people are just handed a bad hand, and it's so unfair to judge and to be to be cruel because you don't know what people are going through. And um, yeah, it was a big wake up call for empathy and understanding that we have it so good in our lives, you know. Um, yeah, that was kind of a closing feeling to the tour for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, there's this another one of your writings. It says, leaving Marco's home just before running. Oh gosh. Just before running into a pack of six young kids, all barefoot and hungry for trouble. I see it. There's an older sibling who's much bigger than the rest. He runs the show, and five other little ones follow his lead. I chirp out, quote, Canada to Mexico, to provoke any reaction as I float by. I glimpse over, seeing the awe on their faces. They try to conceptualize every town, state, or hidden beach that I might have passed. I gain distance between them before hearing a response. My cue for circling back to converse and just to get them excited about adventuring, parentheses, just as Nick would want. They ask, You've biked all the way from Canada? I watch all 12 eyes widen and I relay stories from the road. My run in with an off leash foaming Rottweiler. I pull out six Nick Wood stickers claiming that I, quote, usually don't do this and fist bump each kid. However, I make them promise that they have to slap the sticker somewhere important, somewhere hidden, or a favorite place where tourists might pass by. They ponder,
Cool.
and I can see it within their expressions. Ha, two boys look at each other, both in a synchronized pose. They definitely have a spot. I bike away, glancing backwards to see all six boys sprinting off. Just the right adventure for a Sunday evening. Um, I loved that little piece just because
Yeah.
it's I guess tell me about that moment and what that meant to you.
Yeah, that was one of my highlights of the tour for sure. Uh, Seeing how a tour like this and Nick's legacy can impact a bunch of hood rat kids from Morro Bay, you know, like I think Nick was up there laughing and cheering me on and so stoked about that experience. Um, yeah, I mean, how cool is that? You get to get kids excited. I mean, shit, you have them do the dirty work for you. You have them go around slapping stickers on cars and buildings and secret spots and spreading Nick's psyche and spreading Nick's legacy. Um, that's what those stickers were for, and I'm glad I saved enough of them for all those kids. Um, yeah, yeah, I knew the friends and the family would appreciate that one because I think from a distance, you know, to a kid, it's wild and it's hard to conceptualize and it's crazy and time consuming and all these things, but at the core of it, it's to get people to smile and to feel good and to spread this energy, which was essentially the key of the fund, you know. Whether the kids knew who Nick was or whether they even knew what stickers they were slapping, it was about them having a good time and feeling happy, you know, sharing those experiences. So that's what it was for, you know. And that's a reminder of what the tour was about, is to get people to think, you know. And like what you're doing, I really appreciate this platform to speak, because you're giving people a chance to listen to the stories and to think about Nick and to go onto Spotify and listen to his music. And I mean, that's what it's about. That's why we're doing this, right? Is to get people to realize how beautiful this life is. And the shirts too. Definitely stoked on seeing people wear the shirts, man. That made me smile big time when I saw you
Heck
the
yeah.
first second wearing that thing.
Gotta represent. Um, what does Nick Wood mean to you?
Nick Wood, um, well, at the definition of it, at the definition of it, the Nick Wood Foundation it was made to allow people of all, um, you know, people of all color and economic differences to explore the outdoors and to expand their experiences. So for me, yeah, my fund, my GoFundMe was to support that, was which is to get people excited and to get people who can experience the outdoors an opportunity to go explore. And kind of makes me think about your experience climbing outdoors at the winds, because you know, you go on this grand adventure and you kind of see what's possible and you see the beauty of the outdoors. And that's a huge gateway to further experiences. And so, yeah, I think that's what it means to me, to get people psyched and to get people to want to be outdoors and to experience it when they might not be able to, you know.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I have a sticker on my water bottle. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to chat about the Alaska thing too, because that was a trip. Nick had gone to Alaska right before New Zealand to fish for this family, the Danelskis. And he spent a whole season up there in Kodiak fishing, hand picking salmon from nets. Um, and
I saw him right after he came
yeah,
back.
what was that like? Was he stoked?
Yeah, I was in crazy enough. So I went bird hunting with my dad, one of my best friends, his dad, and Nick, and then Dan Simon was
Whoa.
there. And a couple other people, family friends, and then just people from around the US. And yeah, we were up in South Dakota, and I hadn't seen Nick in probably a year plus. I mean, I'd seen him in like Christmas parties and stuff, but it was September or October. And I actually just got to spend a lot of time with him. And that was like a month before he went to New Zealand. Um, and yeah, I mean, that made everything all the more profound, just because I had talked with
Yeah.
him about his trip and being in Alaska over the summer, and he's like showing me photos. And I remember being amazed, because normally, I mean, I've had a ton of buddies go fish up in Alaska and you're off of a
Mhm.
boat, but he was from shore every day,
Yeah.
and he'd go back and forth. Um, but yeah, he just talked about how fulfilling it was and how much he liked being up there. And yeah, we were just catching up on life. And then yeah, all of a sudden, I remember
Mhm.
I was walking upstairs in my in our condo, and my buddy that I was on that trip with, hunting with, he called me. And yeah, I'll never forget that for sure. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, you
Yeah.
were gonna say something about Alaska.
Yeah, I got to experience that same job that he worked. I
Really?
after the bike tour, I got in connection with the Danelskis and flew out and worked the same gig that he did. With the same family on the same land, working the same job for 40 days. And that was, I mean, it was it was for Nick. I mean, I needed, I mean, like at its core, I had to I was really psyched on getting up there and working a seasonal job instead of fire for a year. But it turned out to be this whole experience. It was such a solitary experience for Nick. I mean, getting on the plane from LAX to Anchorage and then a little plane to Kodiak and then like a little bush plane to Larson Bay and meeting the family, meeting Peter Danelski, who was kind of the captain and knew Nick. It was another reminder and it was another way to kind of feel that out after the bike tour, which I think was a cool way to feel Nick and to work the same job he worked. And yeah, um, yeah, it was pretty cool. I was shared some journal entries that Nick had written about his time in Alaska, about picking salmon, about the super isolated little cannery shop that he lived in and his days on the water. And I got to kind of read that and also live it and meet the people he met and work the same job. It was really special. Um, despite not really having anyone to talk to it about. I mean, the people I worked with, uh, like, yeah. Long story short, there's a real small property in Larson Bay that the Danelskis own, which was originally this old cannery that was used to process salmon, uh, and it was built with old like war bunker material and um, was just it was just this incredible space. And so um, yeah, I got to work that same job that he worked, and I saw the little Nick Wood, or I saw a little Fan Clan sticker slapped
Hmm.
on the bunk bed that
Yeah.
he placed there a year before, and um, yeah, it was cool, man. It was an incredible experience. Um, some really hard days too, different from fire, kind of like way different, but just as hard. Um, Yeah, I remember meeting Peter Danelski too, and I was thinking like, man, this guy was spending so much time with Nick on the boat here, and it was cool to chip in questions and to get kind of people's perspective on Nick because that job is tough at its core, and if you know, people kind of break character when they're challenged. You know, on hard days of work, people break, and I always asked kind of the crewmates and also Peter like what was Nick like, what was he like on a 25,000 pound day of picking, like what the hell was this guy like, because we know him as this quiet old soul who had the biggest smile on his face at all times, and truthfully the answer was the same. It was kind of boring. I was expecting like a crazy answer about Nick bursting, but you know, he had the morale, he had the psych, he didn't care about the tough work, and it was cool to hear those stories from the crewmates who knew him for the job itself. I thought that was a pretty unique experience. I wrote about it a lot. Um, yeah,
Yeah, that's special. Just to hear. I mean, even us, we hadn't met before, and we're talking about um our experiences with Nick, and it's special to be able to relate. I mean, even just over a Zoom call with someone
Yeah.
you haven't met before,
Yeah.
um, about someone so special. So you spent a lot of time reflecting and going full on into the emotions and the reality of Nick passing. And I guess, how do you feel about it now? And what have you learned?
I think it still hurts to think about, and it's tough to hear those words, Nick is dead, and it's just so brutal to think about. Um, but, you know, through his music, which is evident for what he stood for, life is about living it to the fullest and in the experiences that you live. And it's similar to what Fred and Jack Kerouac said. Like, the life you live is about the collection of memories, and I think Nick would stand by that. He's written about it, he's sang it, he's talked about it. So, I feel reassured and I feel justified in what I'm doing with these big trips. And it's just a reminder that life is pretty short, man. Sometimes too short. So you ought to make it count. And that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm gonna do forever. Is I'm gonna live a life that's full of memories, a bank of memories, and I'm gonna have big epics climbing, and I'm gonna have more bike tours to come, and I'm gonna do more fire seasons and more fishing seasons, and at the end of the day, at the end of the lifetime that I live, I'm gonna be able to reflect on that and be stoked because that's what it's about. It's not about this materialistic fake life that we see all the time, And yeah, I'm just really grateful to have known him and to pick up on that and to live out that legacy that he kind of created. Um, so that's what it's about. That's what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna stand by it, no matter how many shitty days on the wall I have to do, or how many freaking nights under bridges I have to camp under, or how many Rottweilers I have to run into on the bike tour. I'm doing it for Nick, for everyone, for the life that I get to live. So that's what it stands for. You know, what do you think it stands for you? Nick's Nick's foundation, the foundation his parents made. I mean, what does that mean to you?
I think well, the phrase Nick would mean to me, I think when I I actually use it a lot more than maybe I don't know than who would think, but whenever I know I should do something and I question it, um whether it's on an adventure or a big life decision, um for me Nick Wood is it's the desire to explore, and it's not, and it is about the outdoors, but I think it's kind of oneself, and to reflect on who you are. And
Yeah, I like that.
yeah, I'd say that's it. I think
I like that.
um the foundation serves as a way to, I think that so many of us are lucky enough. I mean, I was born in a ski town and I grew up fully knowledgeable of the wealth of life that
Mhm.
these outdoor experiences, as we call them, provide. And I think getting people who might not have the ability to into those experiences, and to feel, because I mean, I don't feel as alive in any other situation than when I'm doing those things.
Right.
If we can get more people to feel that way and feel that
That's what
fulfillment
it's about. Yeah, man.
within
That's it.
themselves, yeah, then hell yeah to that. So
Hell yeah.
yeah, that's what that means to me. But I mean, I think about them every day. And
Yeah.
and people ask too. They'll see the water bottle sticker and they're like, "Oh,
Mhm.
what's that mean?" And then it's just another opportunity to tell a story, and it's a challenge too to live as full as he did in the short time
Totally.
he was here. So yeah,
Well said.
thank you. Did was there anything else that you wanted to talk about, or things you wanted to say, or topics we didn't cover? Um, yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe the last kind of topic, uh, it's kind of provoked a lot of these trips. I don't know. I've been filming on a Super 8 camera for the last few months, and coincidentally, I've been filming all along the Pacific coast, from Alaska fishing to my Canada Mexico bike tour to a detour at SB Forge to build, handcrafted pieces to El Cap to Patagonia. I've been kind of fantasizing over this I call it the Pacific Coast Search, and it's a continuous project, but it's a little. Hopefully, one day it's going to be out. Um, I'll have enough money to produce the Super 8 film and have enough stories to put together. But um, I know Nick would be proud of that and pretty stoked. And it really embodies that mountainous storms slash 180 south, 180 degrees south storyline of adventure and climbing and surfing and whatever it is. So it's cool to kind of recreate my own journey along the entire Pacific coast, for whatever that means. But yeah,
That's
yeah,
rad.
I want to incorporate. I want to keep the GoFundMe going because I feel like I can expand more and hopefully get a bigger charity goal. So we'll see, man. I've got a lot of plans and a lot of things I'm brainstorming to continue. I want to go beyond the $15,000 goal. I want to keep that going forever. Get people psyched.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think well, first, just having that footage I mean, I think I am very aware of what it means to be 80 in your 80s and be able to look back at your life. And I think having that for yourself, just because I mean, I've been doing it with my grandpa for 2 years,
Yeah.
and
Right.
with my partner Juliet, and we go through it every day. I see him every day. We see his life every day. Um, and having that, and it sounds like you haven't developed it either, right? And you haven't looked at it. Yeah,
Right. Isn't
dude.
that the issue we all have?
Yeah.
Never. Yeah.
So
It's
like,
the perfectionist in us.
yeah, but like you're gonna have a moment where you get to watch all that,
Yeah.
and you've probably forgotten a lot of those the exact memories and like the way that they played out. And it's not like it's on your phone where you can pull it up. It's like this time capsule in a way.
Right. Yeah,
So
man.
that's super cool.
And that kind of like brings together that first thought, the poet's dream. That's what it's about, is finding this space to write and to complete these projects that we have, dude. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
That's why that is I just fantasize over that those words,
Codes to me.
you find that in whatever you do. But yeah.
Sweet dude. Where's the best place in California to get a breakfast burrito?
Best place to get a breakfast burrito in Santa Barbara. Did you say in the state or in SB?
In
So
SB and the state.
man,
Actually, no, the state, because SB is a part of the state. So we're gonna go with California.
man, there's this spot called Moni's. They make some mean El Pastor burritos here in town. Probably
Okay.
my go-to spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I miss the Mexican food in
Yeah,
California. Oh my gosh.
I bet.
It's unbelievable.
Here's
But
pride.
yeah. Hey, there's great Italian. I had some Italian pastries out in New York. They're called oh my gosh, what are they called? They're like cannolis. Do you know what a cannoli
Yeah,
is, dude? Oh my gosh. I went to this.
you're just
That's
getting put on to cannolis.
what'd you say?
You're just now getting put onto them.
I'm just now getting put onto them. Especially, I mean, the real ones where you're like in an Italian bakery in freaking Staten Island, New York, and
Yeah,
it's the real deal. So I've had them from a market before, but nothing like this. So,
nothing like that, huh?
but yeah, I miss the breakfast burritos for sure. But yeah, was there anything
Hey
else you
man,
wanted to say?
good chatting with you. I
Last
appreciate
words?
the time to talk.
Of course.
Nick Wood. That's what I'm gonna leave it on. Nick Wood.
Nick Wood, I love that. Thanks so much. I mean, that was what, 2 hours, and I really appreciate your time and talking with me about your life and your adventures and about Nick. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Hey,
If
thanks
people
for
want
the time.
to, yeah, of
What's
course.
that?
If people want to follow your adventures and kind of see what you're doing, where can people find you, I guess?
Maybe my Instagram, Rydo
Okay,
underscore RYDOH. That's
got it.
kind of what I post on sometimes. So
Sweet.
yeah,
And yeah, well, I'm stoked to see the adventures you go on, and good luck and stay safe.
thanks, man. You too. Good luck. Take care. See ya.
Have a wonderful evening. Thanks.